They called it the Flying Fortress, a machine built to take hits and still come home. But for the men inside, survival was never guaranteed. Because when a B-17 got hit, the plane wasn't the only thing that broke apart. In those moments, thousands of feet above the earth, it became a fight not to win, but simply to stay alive long enough to fall back home. Every B-17 crewman knew the odds. Nearly half would never return. It didn't matter how strong the fortress was. Once flak found you, luck decided who lived. The B-17 was America's hammer against Nazi Germany. 4 roaring engines and 13.50 caliber guns turning through thin air. It looked unstoppable, a fortress in the clouds. But it flew by daylight. That meant the enemy could see every glint of sunlight off its wings. Each mission meant flying hundreds of miles into the heart of enemy territory. No cover, no escape, no second chances. Once the bomb doors opened, the pilot couldn't dodge. He had to hold the course while black bursts of flak blossomed all around. The crew could only sit still, hands trembling on cold steel, praying the next shell wasn't theirs. Flak wasn't chaos, it was precision. German 88mm and 105mm guns were locked by radar, predicting exactly where each bomber would be. The sky didn't just darken, it boiled. Explosions painted the air with black smoke, and shrapnel shards spinning faster than bullets. You could hear it, the metallic shriek of fragments slicing through aluminum, through oxygen lines, through men. Engines flared. Wings ripped open. Someone screamed over the intercom, or didn't have time to. No one moved. No one could. Formation meant discipline. Stay steady, no evasive action, no heroics. Every pilot had to fly blind through hell so the bombardier could aim true. Then one bomber vanished in fire. Another spun away, trailing smoke. Every man in the air whispered the same prayer: let them open their chutes. Most never did. When a B-17 took a hit, chaos followed instantly. The aircraft might spin, shudder, or break apart in midair. Engines exploded. Oxygen tanks burst. Fuel lines turned into torches. Inside, it was deafening. The temperature dropped below freezing. The wind howled through holes in the fuselage, and the smell of burning fuel filled the air. Crewmen were thrown from their positions or pinned under debris. Some didn't even realize they were falling until they saw the earth spinning below them. Others were trapped, tail gunners sealed in their turrets, waist gunners stuck behind twisted frames, pilots fighting useless controls. In those seconds, training took over, or panic did. Sometimes the fortress didn't just take damage, it split in two. The most famous was the All-American. In 1943, a German fighter clipped its tail clean off mid-air, leaving it hanging by little more than a few twisted panels. The tail gunner looked behind him and saw nothing but empty sky. Every other bomber expected to watch it fall apart, but the autopilot, an electric servo system, somehow stayed engaged, holding the mangled halves together. The formation slowed, watching in disbelief as the broken bomber kept flying. The All-American landed in one piece. Every man lived. No one could explain it, except maybe the stubbornness of the plane and its crew. But miracles like that didn't happen twice. Most hits didn't just cripple the plane, they threw men out of it. A near miss could blow open the fuselage or rip off a turret ball turret gunners, crammed into a space barely 4 feet wide. Couldn't wear parachutes inside. Their chutes were stored in the fuselage above. If a hit came at the wrong moment, they had no chance. One gunner, Alan Magee, learned that the hard way in January 1943. His B-17 was hit over France, and when he tried to reach his parachute, he found it shredded by flak moments later. An explosion blasted him out of the bomber without a chute from 4 miles up. What followed shouldn't have been possible. Magee blacked out in the fall, spinning through the air cold enough to freeze his breath. Unconscious, he tumbled for thousands of feet until fate or luck caught him. He smashed through the glass roof of the Saint-Nazaire train station. The angled pains slowed him just enough before impact. When German soldiers found him, he was barely breathing, bones shattered, body full of shrapnel, but alive. They gave him medical care and sent him to a POW camp. He survived 18 months in captivity and lived to the age of 84. Falling 4 miles without a parachute should have been impossible. But in a B-17, impossible was just another part of the job. Eugene Moran manned the tail guns of Rikki-Tikki-Tavi over Bremen. A fighter shredded the bomber, bullets ripping through his arms and ribs. Then another explosion severed the tail, with him still inside. He was falling alone, 20,000 feet above the ground. In that moment, Moran stopped struggling. He went limp, letting gravity take him. Seconds later, the wreckage hit pine trees, splintering the impact. German soldiers who reached the crash site couldn't believe he was still breathing. A POW doctor saved him with nothing but his bare hands and bandages. He lived. Even for survivors, the sky never stopped falling. When a fortress was torn apart, so was its crew. Pilots still gripping the controls might be flying half an airplane, while waist gunners were already free-falling into the clouds. Escape hatches jammed, parachutes tangled in wiring. Flames blocked exits. Some men made it to the door and were sucked into the open air before they could pull the cord. Others passed out from the cold before even reaching the hatch. Only 1 in 4 crewmen who bailed out ever managed to deploy a parachute. The rest stayed with the ship. For them, the B-17 became both shield and tomb. Still, the B-17 earned its name, Flying Fortress, because sometimes it just refused to go down. Even with engines on fire, wings torn apart, and holes big enough to crawl through, some bombers somehow limped home. Crews worked miracles with what was left. They rerouted fuel lines, used manual controls, and even flew without working instruments. One pilot flew hundreds of miles with half a tail and no elevator control, using throttle power alone to steer. The All-American wasn't the only one. Many bombers returned with half their fuselages missing, engines smoking, or landing gear gone. Some crash-landed in England, with crews cheering from inside ruined shells. Every landing was a story of survival, written in metal and blood. But some hits left nothing to fix, only loss to count. In daylight bombing, numbers were brutal. By 1943, every 4th bomber sent to Germany never came back. Every second crewman was killed. Flak, fighters, freezing air, each one could end a mission instantly. Even if a crew survived being hit, they faced new dangers on the way home: fuel leaks, wounded men, and engines failing over the channel. The U.S. Army estimated that completing a full 25 mission tour gave a man barely a 25% chance of survival. To put it simply, 1 in 4 crews made it home alive. And those who did would never be the same. When control cables were severed, gunners crawled through the fuselage to tie them back with their bare hands. When hydraulic lines burst, navigators used rags and tape to patch leaks. If a man was wounded, others dragged him away from open holes or flames, wrapping him in whatever fabric they could find. In some cases, bombers stayed airborne only because crewmen physically held pieces together. On one flight, the waist gunners used belts and wires to keep the tail from separating. They didn't care about returning to base, only about not leaving anyone behind. But survival always came with a price, and sometimes with guilt. One flight captured everything the fortress stood for. In 1944, a bomber called Lovely Julie took a direct hit over Cologne. A flak shell detonated in the nose, killing the bombardier instantly and blowing the entire front off the aircraft. The pilot, Lawrence Delancey, suddenly sat in open air at 20,000 feet, frozen wind blasting his face at 200 miles per hour. The gauges were gone. The oxygen line was gone. His hands were going numb. He dove to a lower altitude so his crew wouldn't suffocate. With nothing but raw instinct, he flew the half-missing bomber through German fire, across the channel, and somehow back to England. He landed without brakes, without flaps, and without fear. Every man on board lived. The fortress could be torn apart and still fly, because the men inside refused to quit. When a B-17 took a hit, it wasn't just metal that shattered. It was the line between life and death. Some crews burned, some fell, some clawed the sky all the way home. They fought gravity, fear, and fire, not for medals, but for each other. To them, the fortress wasn't just a bomber. It was a coffin and a promise that even if they fell apart, they would fall together. That's what really happens to a B-17 crew after a hit. They don't just crash, they fight the sky itself, and sometimes, against all odds, they make it back.